The lore and mysticism that surrounds the philosophy of Thelema is truly something of a rabbit hole. The further one walks into the depths of such an occult practice, the more likely they will find themselves in a darker part of magical esotericism. Of course, at the centre of many such discoveries is the man who started it all, Aleister Crowley, the founder of the Thelemic movement in the early 20th century. At its core, Thelema proclaimed the axiom, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," a declaration that encapsulated the belief in individual sovereignty and the pursuit of one's true will. In addition to this, Thelema weaves together strands of ceremonial enchantment, ancient occult traditions, and lest we forget the controversial sex magic, often touted by Crowley himself, all of which allowed for practitioners to explore the inner dimensions of consciousness and witness other planes of existence, the aethyrs, if you will. Whilst Thelemites might aim to embody this notion of do what thou wilt, or perhaps may even wish to seek some form of enlightenment through occult magic and ritual, Crowley warned in his works that there may have been a risk of going too far down this road, a road in his experience which led to a dangerous confrontation with the demon Choronzon. Known as the Demon of Dispersion, or the Dweller in the Abyss, Choronzon has come to symbolize chaos, fragmentation, and the breakdown of order. Although almost unheard of in most Christian and Judaic classifications, Crowley's first-hand account of the demon, if it's to be believed, conveys a chilling and rather alarming anecdote that might make one think twice about summoning such beings into this world. Choronzon's first appearance did not begin with Aleister Crowley, but rather had existed some 400 years prior, when documented by 16th century occultists Edward Kelly and John Dee. The latter would form an occult system known as Enochian magic, a Renaissance magic that was believed to essentially allow the practitioner to commune with angels with an old angelic language. John Dee was believed to use Edward Kelly's clairvoyant gifts, whereby Kelly would travel to a higher realm of spiritual existence and Dee would vicariously communicate through Kelly in an effort to tempt the angels into revealing secrets of the universe. Sometime during this contact with angels, a number of demonic names were revealed to Dee through Kelly, one of these being Choronzon. Despite establishing a secret angelic language known as Enochian, and despite subsequently piecing together an entire cosmology of angels, demons, and the aethyrs, these being otherworldly realms, both Kelly and Dee made little effort to elaborate much on each individual entity. Later efforts by Jewish mystics aimed to elaborate on Choronzon's nature by using various gematria systems that convert numerical values into words. According to one system, Choronzon's name bears the value of 333, which in some belief systems is actually a good thing, an angelic number in fact, and an emphasis of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But going by another interpretation, 333 is half of 666, the number of the beast as described to us in the Book of Revelation. While still contested, the identity of the beast has been linked to Satan, or at the very least, the Antichrist. So with Choronzon's name representing half of that number, in 333, it has led some to believe that Choronzon is an aspect of Satan, or the Antichrist. Not quite as significant as the big bad himself, but filled with similar sentiments nonetheless, one who wishes to see the downfall of humanity. It's interesting though that Crowley didn't really delve into any of this, nor seem to apply much in the way of traditional scripture unto the demon in question. In fact, to call Choronzon a demon, by Crowley's estimation, would be somewhat inaccurate. Crowley doesn't refer to it so much as demonic, but more of a personification of chaos, a representation of all that which manifested in the abyss, thus making him the dweller in the abyss in Thelemic belief. Now upon first glance, it might be tempting to once more associate this with Satan. The abyss is very commonly interchanged with the concept of hell, and because we know Satan dwells in hell, you can see why there might be some overlap between Choronzon and Satan. But in terms of Thelemic belief, the abyss isn't exactly hell. it can be defined as more of a space that exists between two realities, a space by which the Thelemite must cross in order to reach a sense of enlightenment. To some practitioners, this can also be referred to as the death of the ego, where the Thelemite transcends beyond this abyss and relinquishes their ego on the path to something greater. Of course, considering that Choronzon is the sole inhabitant of this chasm between realities, this abyss, we can wager that he isn't exactly just letting people pass through. In effect, Choronzon comes to represent the metaphorical dragon that needs to be slayed, and yet to enter into the dragon's lair unprepared and without any strength is a guaranteed way to see yourself incinerated. Choronzon is believed to operate in the same way. Indeed, there is a penalty for failing to defeat him on the way to enlightenment. Some suggest that Choronzon tests those who come to his abyss, and that the only way to pass this test is to abandon the ego. Failure to do this can see one possessed by Choronzon, who craves not only for physical existence, but also to feed on one's spirit. In his works, The Vision and the Voice, and later The Confessions, Crowley claimed to have taken Choronzon's test, and emerged victorious. At some point in 1909, Crowley had decided that he wanted to go past the limits of the aethyrs, described in the works by Edward Kelly and John Dee. However, in doing so, he realised that he would have to pass through the 10th Aethyr, where the wicked Choronzon inhabited the outermost abyss. He also understood that if he was to be successful in this encounter, perhaps even survive this encounter, then no shred of his ego would be allowed to remain. In essence, Crowley would need to experience the ego death. On top of this, Crowley would, in a sense, need to take part in a battle of will and wits that would test his magical ability against a supernatural foe that had existed since probably the dawn of time. Despite such a tall order, Crowley was confident he could tame Choronzon and could sacrifice his ego in order to reach beyond the abyss and further into mystical enlightenment. Failure, though, was a heavy burden to bear, for it was believed by Crowley that should Choronzon overpower him, he would be enslaved by the demon, annihilated spiritually, and corrupted into oblivion. With this in mind, Crowley took every precaution he could think of. According to the work The Vision and the Voice, specifically in a chapter titled as The Tenth Aethyr, we see Crowley and his partner Victor Newberg venture into the Algerian desert in December of 1909, where, according to Crowley, they intended to conduct the magical ritual to summon and confront Choronzon in the vast wilderness. Going by the introduction of this ritual in the 10th Aethyr, there were two crucial roles in this ceremony: the scribe, which was Newberg's responsibility, and the seer, which was Crowley's responsibility. Essentially, Crowley would be the one battling Choronzon in the other plane, whilst Newberg would be there to detail all the comings and goings. The scribe, Newberg, was to be sat in the centre of a circle in the desert, and the circle would be fortified by the holy names of God. He was armed with what was described as a magical dagger, and had been given strict instructions by Crowley to use it if any manifestation from the other side attempted to break the circle. Meanwhile, the demon would be invoked within a triangle, wherein was inscribed the name of Choronzon. The seer, Crowley, was believed to have slain a pigeon as part of a sacrifice within this triangle, the blood of which was meticulously placed into 3 corners of the shape, so as to trap whatever spawned within the triangle. Now, accounts do differ as to where Crowley positioned himself, with some believing he sat sequestered away, somewhere else in the desert that was unbeknownst to the demon, and others believing he actually sat within the triangle itself, attempting to connect directly with whatever materialized. In any case, it is believed that Crowley would be shrouded by the hood of his robe, and would enter into a trance in order to seek the abyss and attempt to move past it. Whatever they did that day, it was said to have worked, for when Choronzon was summoned and stood before them, he wasn't shy about it. He was rather candidly said to speak, "I am I, I have shut myself up from the spendthrifts. My gold is safe in my treasure chamber, and I have made every living thing my concubine, and none shall touch them, save only I, and yet I am scorched, even while I shiver in the wind. He hateth me and tormenteth me. He would have stolen me from myself, but I shut myself up and mock at him, even while he plagueth me. From me come leprosy and pox, and plague and cancer, and cholera and the falling sickness. Ah, I will reach up to the knees of the Most High, and tear his phallus with my teeth, and I will bray his testicles in a mortar, and make poison thereof, to slay the sons of men. As we can see, the demon didn't go about mincing words. It made it clear that it was no friend of humanity, and much less a friend to any god that humanity would hearken to. What's interesting about this introduction by the demon is that it was said to have spoken with Aleister Crowley's voice, perhaps an effort by Choronzon to manipulate the scribe Newberg into leaving the circle, for which the demon would pounce on him or trick him into inviting him in. These sorts of tricks are detailed quite prominently in the Tenth Aethyr account, where Newberg noted that the demon laughed wildly and loudly. It spewed insults, and at one point it even took the form of one of Newberg's ex-lovers, attempting to woo him with soft words and glances. This transformation by the demon was shown to be typical in Newberg's account, and that the reason the demon did this wasn't necessarily to cause deception, but because it had no actual form, and that it enjoyed making forms to impersonate with. The text tells us, Choronzon hath no form, because he is the maker of all form, and so rapidly changeth from one to the other, as he may best think fit to seduce those whom he hateth, the servants of the Most High. Thus taketh he the form of a beautiful woman, or of a wise and holy man, or of a serpent that writheth upon the earth, ready to sting. It's interesting that despite this being Crowley's battle, it is Newberg who is seen in the text to endure the more physical side of the confrontation. We see that the demon is relentless in trying to tempt Newberg away from the safety of the magic circle, where it doubled down in its efforts to seduce him. It appeased his mercy by begging for water, and at one point even taunted Newberg that magic wasn't even real, and that everything that they were doing here was pointless, all things that would lure or trick Newberg out of the safety of the circle. Whilst Newberg is baited by the demon into anger and retaliation, he never does leave the circle, which eventually prompts Choronzon to admit defeat, and to admit to lying about all of his previous statements. He concludes here that had Newberg felt pity and offered him water, he would have stomped on him, or that if he had been seduced by the forms of the women he took, he would have torn his testicles off with his teeth, or that if he had appeased his pride and lured him out of the circle with a false sense of safety, that he would have blasted Newberg with flames. But alas, he concedes, he was not able to prevail against him. All this, however, may as well have been another scheme, for whilst Newberg was busy writing down everything the demon was saying, Choronzon was discreetly tossing sand into the circle so as to break the formation. When the circle was compromised, Choronzon was seemingly able to breach the triangle that held him, sprang upon Newberg, and threw him to the ground. As the text tells us, there was a struggle between man and demon, with the latter appearing in the shape of a wild, naked savage. Newberg recalled that the demon in this guise attempted to tear out his throat with its froth-covered fangs. Newberg, though, ultimately overpowered the demon by invoking the name of his gods, who helped fend off the demon. With the magical dagger in hand, Newberg struck at the demon and forced it back into its triangle, allowing Newberg to fix the circle and recompose himself. Despite being defeated, Choronzon continued to mock, tempt, and plead with Newberg, using all manner of deceptions to undermine and manipulate him. However, in just over 2 hours, the manifestation of Choronzon began to fade, and the triangle emptied of its prisoner, which could only mean one thing. Crowley had won. According to some accounts, Crowley, who'd been sitting inside the triangle with Choronzon in trance, was now suddenly aware of his surroundings. He was said to have scrawled the name Babylon, the name of the great mother goddess in Thelema, into the sand, as a testament that his victory over Choronzon was complete. With the ritual completed, the two men were said to have lit a great fire, for which they burned both the circle and the triangle so as to destroy any trace of Choronzon from this world. Later, Crowley would state that he had astrally identified himself with Choronzon throughout the process, and that he had felt every element of rage and despair that the demon had expressed during its captivity. We are led to believe here that though Newberg literally wrestled with the demon, which does sound more impressive, Crowley's experience in the abyss was far more exhaustive in ways we couldn't possibly comprehend. Both men, in their experiences, were now nonetheless more adept in their understanding of the abyss, and had come to realize that the terrifying entity that dwelled there was not something to be taken lightly. Indeed, both men were said to have been so shell-shocked by the encounter that Crowley claimed they had no recollection of how they even made it out of the desert at all. In his later works, titled The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, Crowley redefines the concept of Choronzon the demon, explaining that he is not really an individual, but rather something of an amalgamation of all the malignant forces that gather in the abyss. This amalgamation has no form, but it craves to have one. A real physical presence, that is, which perhaps might explain why it was so keen to transform into several different bodies to affect Newberg. Crowley tells us of Choronzon's desire to have an actual form by stating, "These forms swirl senselessly into haphazard heaps like dust devils, and each such chance aggregation asserts itself to be an individual that shrieks, 'I am,' though aware all the time that its elements have no true bond." In his Confessions, Crowley asserts that whilst he was in this trance, with his hood over his face, he was not aware at that moment of what was happening around him. It was only from Newberg's account did he learn that Choronzon had attempted to take the form of himself too, before resorting to transform into Newberg's ex-lover, and then later a serpent with a human's head. What's more, Crowley in some aspect seems to undermine Choronzon by implying that so long as you don't listen to him whilst you're in the magical circle, his power is considerably reduced. As we know from the previous account, Newberg was baited several times by Choronzon and conversed angrily with the demon, but Crowley tells us here that the demon is prone to mutter senselessly and shouldn't be taken to heart. He tells us, "Choronzon could not utter the word of the abyss, because there is no word. Its voice is the insane babble of a multitude of senseless ejaculations." Nonetheless, Crowley does pay Choronzon some respect by reminding readers that the demon was canny enough to try and shake Newberg's faith in himself, try to convince him into doubting magic in the first place, and to even attempt to kill him at one point. Indeed, Crowley warns that whilst Choronzon should not be feared, it should be remembered to all who attempt to evoke him that this is not the sort of demon that should be taken lightly in the slightest. What's interesting about this entry into Crowley's Confessions is that Crowley doesn't sound particularly victorious. The whole purpose of the ritual was to glimpse the abyss and to withstand it, that which would require the death of the ego. Yet Crowley doesn't tell us if he was explicitly successful in this endeavour. In fact, many who dispute and condemn Crowley are quick to remind readers that his ego was quite possibly one of the main things he was known for after his supposed magic. What's more, Crowley's purported defeat of Choronzon doesn't come in the form of a definitive mental beatdown, but instead because they simply ran out of time. Crowley tells us in his own words that, "At last, all the energy latent in the blood of the pigeons was exhausted by the successive phantoms, so that it was no longer able to give form to the forces evoked. The triangle was empty." Indeed, Crowley doesn't specify that he had overcome Choronzon, but more so the case that the fuel that was keeping Choronzon tethered, this being the pigeon blood, expired in its purpose, causing the link that kept Choronzon in this world to dissipate too. In that sense, it sounds like Crowley didn't defeat the demon at all. He had merely survived the encounter. Now, going by the Thelemic belief, surviving such an encounter is the victory, for the knowledge and power gained through such an experience is believed to be enriching. So perhaps this was the sentiment that Crowley was hoping to divulge to us, that one didn't defeat a demon in a traditional sense, but rather could face it and return relatively unscathed, and richer for the confrontation. On the other hand though, there are believers of this magic system that consider the possibility that Crowley didn't survive this encounter at all, and that he had lost the battle with Choronzon, causing the demon to eradicate him and subsequently possess him thereafter. Interestingly, it is believed by some contemporaries that after this supposed encounter in the desert, Crowley was never quite the same again. Some amongst the Thelemic tradition believe that Crowley may have been permanently changed by his confrontation with Choronzon in the Algerian desert, and that there was a possibility that Crowley was no longer inside his own body at all, but rather had been annihilated by the demon, who now assumed his form. Some have made efforts to counter this claim by noting that if this was true, then Crowley wouldn't have destroyed the original pages of Newberg's notebook, of which the account that day was written, an act some believe was done in an effort to protect other summoners from mimicking his ritual and endangering themselves. He tells us in a footnote of the Vision and the Voice that the greatest precautions were taken at that time, and have since been yet further fortified, to keep silence concerning the rite of evocation. Others, however, believe that this was Choronzon's doing, seeking to deny anyone else with the knowledge that would see him summoned into similar triangles, and bound there by the blood of pigeons. Skeptics, meanwhile, see this as merely another convenient detail on behalf of Crowley, who continue to mar and convolute the facts so as to maintain immunity from direct scrutiny. Through this idea, by destroying the original notes, Crowley unburdens himself of having to provide the true account, but also adds to the allure and intrigue of his work, drawing audiences in with the possibility of what if. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've enjoyed the video, then please leave a like, as this does trick the algorithm into recommending more of my content. We're really close to 1 million subscribers now, so if you want to help push us over the edge, then do smack that subscribe button and consider becoming a channel member. Until next time.